Inside Sing Sing, the prison that changed the face of criminal justice. The siren echoed off the Hudson River like a warning shot from history itself. It was a cold evening in Ossining, New York, when guards rushed across the stone yard of Sing Correctional Facility. Floodlights snapped on, cutting through the fog rolling off the river. Inside cell block B, something had gone terribly wrong. An inmate had collapsed during evening count, unresponsive, face pale, eyes fixed on nothing. By the time the prison doctor arrived, it was already too late. No weapon was found. No signs of a struggle. Just a man dead inside one of the most tightly controlled prisons in America. And that was the problem. Because Sing Sing wasn't just any prison. It was a machine built to observe, control, and dominate every second of a man's life. Deaths were supposed to be predictable here. Executions, illness, violence with witnesses. But this death raised quiet alarms that reached far beyond the prison walls, back through nearly 2 centuries of blood, reform, and unanswered questions. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand where it happened. Sing Sing rose from the banks of the Hudson in 1826, built by inmates forced to quarry stone by day and sleep in chains by night. The prison was designed to be a warning, not just to criminals, but to society itself. Its name became synonymous with fear. Judges whispered it. Newspapers splashed it across headlines. For generations, Sing Sing meant one thing. Once you entered, the world forgot you. By the early 1900s, overcrowding had turned cell blocks into pressure cookers. Men slept inches apart. Disease spread fast. Guards ruled through intimidation. Silence was enforced. Resistance was crushed. Sing Sing wasn't meant to rehabilitate, it was meant to break. Then came Thomas Mott Osborne. In 1914, Osborne walked through Sing Sing's gates not as a prisoner, but as its new warden. He was different from the men who came before him. He didn't bark orders. He didn't carry a baton. He carried an idea that shocked the prison system to its core. Inmates should govern themselves. Osborne believed criminals were still human beings. Dangerous thinking at the time. He created the Mutual Welfare League, allowing prisoners to vote on representatives, voice grievances, and participate in education programs. Men who had lived under constant fear were suddenly being asked to take responsibility, for themselves and for each other. The backlash was immediate. Guards accused Osborne of being weak. Politicians accused him of endangering public safety. Newspapers painted him as a radical who cared more about criminals than victims. Inside the prison, tension simmered. Some inmates embraced the change. Others saw it as a trap. And behind locked doors, resentment grew. Years later, long after Osborne was forced out, Sing Sing would become infamous for something else entirely, the electric chair. They called it Old Sparky. Installed in the early 20th century, it became the final stop for hundreds of condemned prisoners. Executions were carried out behind thick walls, but the knowledge seeped through every corridor. Inmates could feel it. Guards could hear it. The low hum of electricity before the switch was thrown became part of Sing Sing's identity. In 1953, the prison became the center of global attention when Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were executed there, accused of passing nuclear secrets to the Soviet Union. Outside the gates, protesters shouted. Inside, the executions proceeded as scheduled. Justice, some said. Murder by the state, others argued. That debate never left Sing Sing. Which brings us back to the dead inmate on the floor of cell block B. Investigators reviewed surveillance footage. No one entered his cell. No one left. His last meal showed no obvious signs of poisoning. Fellow inmates claimed he had been nervous for weeks, constantly looking over his shoulder, whispering about the chair and files that never disappear. Then a correctional officer came forward with something unsettling. The inmate had recently been assigned to the prison library, one of the oldest rooms in Sing Sing. A place filled with dusty ledgers, execution logs, and disciplinary records dating back decades. Records most people never saw. Records that documented punishments, experiments, and decisions the state preferred to forget. When investigators searched the library storage room, they found a section had been disturbed. Boxes pulled out. Papers missing. And tucked behind a loose stone in the wall, they found a folded document stained with sweat and fear. A list of names. Former inmates. Guards. Officials. Some dead. Some still alive. And at the bottom, written in shaking ink, were 3 words that stopped the investigation cold. Sing lied. The list changed everything. Investigators treated it like a live wire, passing it hand to hand inside latex gloves, careful not to smudge the ink or the implications. The names weren't random. They spanned decades, crossing eras of wardens, reforms, and scandals. Some belonged to inmates who had died quietly behind bars. Others were guards who had retired early, transferred suddenly, or vanished from public records altogether. And a few names were still active employees at Sing. The inmate who died, Marcus Reed, had no violent history. No gang ties. No reason to be targeted inside a prison where violence always had a motive. Reed was serving a long sentence for fraud, not murder. He was quiet, educated, and meticulous. The kind of man who survived prison by staying invisible. Until he didn't. Reed's library assignment gave him access few inmates ever had. Old execution logs. Disciplinary files. Medical reports from the early 1900s, written in language that blurred punishment with experimentation. Documents from the Osborne era that hinted at internal power struggles far darker than public history books suggested. Some files referenced corrective isolation. Others mentioned behavioral compliance testing. The most disturbing entries didn't describe crimes, they described outcomes. Reed had checked out several of those boxes in the weeks before his death. When investigators questioned the guards who supervised the library, the stories didn't line up. One claimed Reed worked alone. Another insisted he was never left unsupervised. Surveillance footage from the hallway outside the library was incomplete, a 2-hour gap caused by what officials first described as routine system maintenance. That explanation didn't survive scrutiny. As pressure mounted, the state brought in an external review team. Quietly. No press releases. No announcements. Sing had lived through enough scandals to know how dangerous attention could be. The review team started with the names on the list. The first shock came quickly. One of the guards listed, Frank Delaney, had been involved in a 1989 inmate death ruled accidental. Delaney had written the incident report himself. The inmate had fallen from a tier during night count. No witnesses. Case closed. Except Reed's notes suggested there had been witnesses, and that they'd been transferred within days. Another name belonged to a former prison doctor who had signed off on dozens of execution-related medical clearances. His notes were unusually detailed. Heart rates. Stress reactions. Time to unconsciousness measurements. Clinical language, detached and precise. The implication was chilling. Some executions hadn't just been punishments. They had been observed, studied. As the review team dug deeper, Sing seemed to push back. Files requested from storage arrived incomplete. Boxes were mislabeled. One entire ledger from the 1940s was declared missing. A senior administrator claimed it had been destroyed years earlier during a flood. Maintenance records didn't support that claim. Then a second incident occurred. A correctional officer, one of the names on Reed's list, failed to report for duty. His car was found parked near the Hudson River, engine cold, doors locked. Inside the trunk, investigators found a single object wrapped in brown paper. An original Sing execution log. The officer turned up 2 days later, alive but shaken. He claimed he'd been threatened. Anonymous messages. Late-night calls with no one on the line. A voice once whispered a date, 1916, and hung up. That date mattered. It was the year Thomas Mott Osborne left Sing, forced out after accusations of misconduct that were never fully proven or disproven. Official history painted his departure as political fallout. Reed's notes suggested something else, an internal revolt that went far beyond ideology. According to fragments pulled from sealed files, Osborne's inmate self-governance experiment had uncovered corruption among senior guards, illegal punishments, financial kickbacks, and unauthorized executions carried out under the cover of discipline. When Osborne pushed to expose it, the system closed ranks. He was removed. The files were buried. And Sing Sing returned to order. But not all the records disappeared. Some were copied, hidden, passed down quietly through generations of staff who believed certain truths were too dangerous to surface. Others stayed locked away, waiting for someone like Reed, curious, patient, and desperate for meaning, to find them. The review team realized they weren't just investigating a death. They were peeling back a century-old cover-up. Then came the breakthrough. A forensic analyst re-examining Reed's body noticed something overlooked during the initial autopsy: microscopic traces of a compound used historically to treat severe anxiety, but in doses that could stop the heart when combined with stress. The compound was no longer in general medical use. Except in one place. Sing Sing's medical wing still stocked it, reserved for special cases under strict authorization. When investigators traced the access logs, only 3 people had signed out the compound in the past year. All 3 names were on Reed's list, and one of them had final authority over prison medical records. As investigators prepared to make arrests, a sealed envelope arrived at the state attorney's office. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. It showed Marcus Reed in the prison library, holding an execution ledger open to a page dated June 1953. And behind him, reflected faintly in the glass of a cabinet, stood someone watching. Someone who was never supposed to be there. The photograph detonated the case. The reflection was grainy but unmistakable, an older man in a tailored suit, standing where no civilian or administrator should have been allowed. He wasn't wearing a uniform. He wasn't wearing a badge. Yet he stood calmly inside the prison library, watching Marcus Reed turn the pages of an execution ledger like a man supervising an inspection. Facial recognition matched him within hours. His name did not appear on any current Sing Sing roster, but it appeared everywhere else. He was a former state corrections official, long retired, once embedded in multiple oversight committees dating back to the late 1970s. A man who had signed off on prison audits, reform reports, and internal investigations, many of which concluded that Sing Sing's darkest accusations were unsubstantiated. He was also the son of a Sing Sing guard listed in Reed's notes. When investigators brought him in for questioning, he didn't deny being in the photograph. He questioned why it had taken them so long. The story he told unraveled nearly 2 centuries of carefully managed truth. According to him, Sing Sing was never just a prison. It was a proving ground. From the early days of Osborne's reforms to the era of the electric chair, the prison became a place where theories of punishment, fear, obedience, and control were tested under the banner of justice. Behavioral compliance, isolation effects, stress thresholds, execution efficiency, all documented, all justified as progress. When political winds shifted, the experiments didn't stop. They adapted. Oversight committees were created to investigate abuses, but those committees were staffed by people who understood the value of silence. Files were classified. Language softened. Punishment became procedure. Death became outcome. The machine learned how to hide itself. Marcus Reed wasn't supposed to find the original ledgers. He wasn't supposed to notice inconsistencies between public execution records and internal medical logs. He wasn't supposed to see names repeating across decades, guards who never advanced, doctors who never transferred, administrators who appeared whenever something needed to disappear. Reed made one mistake. He believed truth still mattered. The night he died, Reed had requested a meeting with prison medical staff, claiming severe anxiety. That request triggered a protocol known only to a handful of senior officials, a quiet intervention designed to stabilize individuals who posed a risk to institutional security. The compound administered to him wasn't meant to kill. It was meant to silence. But Reed's heart failed faster than expected. An accident, they claimed. A tragic complication. This time, the system miscalculated. With the confession recorded, arrests followed swiftly. 2 medical staff members. A deputy administrator. Charges ranged from manslaughter to obstruction of justice. The former corrections official was charged last, after investigators linked him directly to sealed directives authorizing covert interventions dating back decades. The media descended on Sing Sing with a fury it hadn't seen since the Rosenberg executions. Before this video ends, hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me in the comments, do you believe prisons are meant to punish or to change people?